He thought he was marrying the perfect high society queen, a woman who would secure his empire. But Dante Moretti didn't know that behind closed doors, his fiancée was a monster. It took a clumsy, terrified waitress and one unthinkable act of courage to shatter the lies and reveal the bloody truth. The rain was hammering against the stained glass windows of Le Jardin, the most exclusive restaurant in downtown Chicago. Inside, the air smelled of truffles, expensive cologne, and fear. Rachel Miller smoothed her apron for the 10th time that hour. Her hands were trembling. She wasn't just nervous because she was behind on her rent, or because her mother's medical bills at St. Jude's were piling up on the kitchen counter. She was nervous because he was here, Dante Moretti. Everyone in the city knew the name. He wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of the Moretti Syndicate. He sat at the center table, looking like a statue carved out of marble and violence. Across from him sat Veronica Sinclair, his fiancée. She was wearing a red dress that likely cost more than Rachel would earn in 5 years. She was beautiful, sharp, and had a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But the person who drew Rachel's attention wasn't the mafia don or the socialite. It was the elderly woman sitting in the wheelchair beside Dante. Donna Isabella, Dante's mother. Rumor had it she suffered from advanced dementia. She looked frail, her eyes darting around the room in confusion, clutching a linen napkin like a lifeline. Table 4 needs water. Now, the manager hissed at Rachel, shoving a crystal pitcher into her hands. And for God's sake, don't look Mr. Moretti in the eye. Rachel took a breath and walked toward the center of the room. As she approached, she could hear the conversation. Or rather, the monologue. Veronica was talking about wedding arrangements, floral arches, and importing silk from Milan. Dante was checking his watch, nodding absently, clearly distracted by a vibrating phone on the table. "Dante, are you even listening?" Veronica snapped, her voice low but venomous. "I said I don't want your mother at the head table. She drools. It's embarrassing." Dante's head snapped up. His eyes, usually cold, burned with a sudden fire. "She sits where I say she sits, Veronica. She is my mother." "She's a vegetable, Dante," Veronica whispered, taking a sip of her champagne. At that exact moment, Donna Isabella's shaking hand knocked against her wine glass. Crash. The sound of shattering crystal silenced the entire restaurant. A dark red stain began to spread across the pristine white tablecloth, dripping onto Veronica's custom red dress. The silence was deafening. Dante immediately stood up, his face filled with concern. "Mama?" But before he could reach her, his phone rang, a specific ringtone that meant emergency. He looked torn. "Go," Veronica said, her voice suddenly sweet and understanding, masking her rage. "Take the call, darling. I'll help her clean up. It's just an accident." Dante hesitated, looked at his frightened mother, and then nodded. "I'll be right back." He stepped away toward the balcony doors to take the call. The moment the glass doors clicked shut behind him, the atmosphere at the table shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rachel, who had rushed over with a towel, froze. She was standing right behind Veronica. Veronica leaned in close to the old woman. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her hand shot out under the table. Rachel saw it. Veronica's manicured nails dug viciously into the soft, thin skin of Donna Isabella's wrist. The old woman whimpered, a sound of pure heartbreak. "You stupid old hag," Veronica hissed, her voice barely audible over the restaurant's jazz music. "You ruined my dress. You think you're going to be at my wedding? I'll have you rot in a home before I let you ruin my pictures." She dug her nails in deeper. Isabella began to cry softly, too confused and scared to pull away. Rachel didn't think. She didn't calculate the risk. She didn't remember that Dante Moretti killed people who crossed him. She only saw a bully hurting a helpless grandmother. Rachel stepped forward and dropped the heavy water pitcher onto the table with a loud thud, right next to Veronica's hand. Water splashed everywhere, drenching Veronica's face and hair. Veronica shrieked, jumping back and releasing Isabella's wrist. "You idiot! What are you doing?" "I'm so sorry, Mum," Rachel said loudly, her voice shaking, but her eyes locked on Veronica's. "I tripped, but I think you were hurting her." "Excuse me?" Veronica gasped, wiping mascara from her cheek. "Do you know who I am? I will have you fired. I will have you on the street." "She was pinching her," Rachel said, grabbing a warm cloth and immediately turning to Donna Isabella. She ignored the screaming woman and gently took the old woman's hand. "It's okay, Signora. It's just wine. Look, it's gone." Rachel wiped the wine from Isabella's trembling fingers, her touch incredibly gentle. She saw the angry red crescent marks on the old woman's wrist where Veronica's nails had been. "Does that hurt?" Rachel whispered. Donna Isabella looked up at Rachel. For a second, the fog in her eyes cleared. She squeezed Rachel's hand. "Grazie," she wheezed. "What is going on here?" The voice was deep and vibrated through the floorboards. Dante was back. Veronica instantly burst into fake tears. "Dante, this waitress. She threw water on me. And look, she's harassing your mother. She grabbed Isabella's hand so hard she's crying." Dante looked at the chaotic scene. His fiancée was wet and crying. The waitress was holding his mother's hand. His mother had tears in her eyes. He walked up to Rachel, towering over her. He smelled of tobacco and rain. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Did you touch my mother?" Rachel looked up. She was terrified, but she didn't let go of Isabella's hand. "I was cleaning her up, sir. She was scared. She attacked me," Veronica screamed. "Look at me, Dante. Fire her. Make sure she never works in this city again." Dante looked at Rachel. He looked at the water jug. Then he looked at his mother. Isabella was no longer crying. She was looking at Rachel with a calm expression she hadn't worn in months. "Get out," Dante said to Rachel. Rachel's heart shattered. She nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "Yes, sir." She let go of Isabella's hand and ran toward the kitchen, knowing she had just lost the only income keeping her mother alive. As she fled, she didn't see Dante grab his mother's wrist to check her pulse, his thumb brushing over the fresh, angry red nail marks that were clearly not from a waitress's rough hands, but from long, sharp talons. He looked at Veronica, who was busy drying her hair, oblivious to the storm brewing in his eyes. 3 days later, Rachel was sitting in her cramped apartment on 4th Street, staring at an eviction notice. She had been fired immediately after the shift. The manager didn't even let her keep her tips. There was a heavy knock on the door. Rachel jumped. "Who is it?" "Ms. Miller. Open up." It wasn't a question. Rachel opened the door a crack. 2 men in dark suits stood there. Behind them, parked illegally next to a fire hydrant, was a black Rolls-Royce Phantom. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence," one of the men said. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Please, I can't go with you." "It wasn't a request, Ms. Miller." 20 minutes later, Rachel was standing in the foyer of the Moretti estate. It was a fortress of stone and iron, located on the cliffs overlooking the lake. The floors were marble, and the silence was suffocating. Dante Moretti stood by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked even more intimidating in his own home. "You have a sick mother," Dante said without turning around. Rachel blinked. How do you know that?" "I know everything about you, Rachel Miller. I know you owe St. Jude's Hospital $12,000. I know you are 3 months behind on rent. And I know you spilled water on my fiancée to make her let go of my mother's arm." Rachel remained silent. She was shaking. Dante turned. "Why didn't you defend yourself? When Veronica accused you, you said nothing." "Would you have believed me?" Rachel asked quietly. "She's your fiancée. I'm just a waitress." Dante studied her. "My mother has had 5 nurses in the last month. She screamed at all of them. But she let you hold her hand." He placed a check on the table. "This pays your mother's hospital bills, in full." Rachel gasped. "I can't accept that." "You can. And you will," Dante said, "because you are going to work for me now. You are going to be my mother's personal caretaker. You live here, you eat here, you protect her." "But, Ms. Sinclair, Veronica does not run this house," Dante said, his voice hardening. "I do." Rachel took the job. She had no choice. However, moving into the Moretti mansion was like moving into a war zone. Veronica was there almost every day, planning the wedding, and every time she saw Rachel, her eyes promised murder. For 2 weeks, things were tense, but manageable. Rachel was good with Donna Isabella. She sang to her, combed her hair, and fed her soups. Isabella began to smile again. She started speaking in fragments, but the peace couldn't last. It was a Tuesday evening. Dante was hosting a gala for the city's elite, the Blue Orchid charity event, right there in the mansion's ballroom. The house was filled with senators, judges, and rival mob bosses. Dante had given Rachel strict instructions. "Keep Mama in her room. The noise upsets her. Lock the door from the inside." Rachel had obeyed. She was in the upstairs suite, reading a book to Isabella, who was dozing off. Suddenly, the door handle rattled. Then a click. A key turned in the lock. The door swung open. It was Veronica. She was wearing a shimmering silver gown, looking like an ice queen. She smelled of vodka and expensive perfume. "You!" Veronica sneered, closing the door behind her. "Get out. I need to speak to my future mother-in-law. Mr. Moretti gave me strict orders to stay." "I don't care what," Dante said. Veronica snapped. "I am going to be the lady of this house in a month. You are the help. Get out, or I will frame you for theft. I'll plant my diamond earrings in your bag right now." Rachel hesitated. She looked at Isabella, who was awake and looking terrified. But Rachel knew she couldn't fight Veronica alone. Not yet. "I'll be right outside the door," Rachel said firmly. "Go to the kitchen and get me a sparkling water," Veronica commanded. Rachel left the room, her heart pounding. But she didn't go to the kitchen. She closed the door, walked a few heavy steps down the hall to make it sound like she was leaving, and then tiptoed back. She pressed her ear to the heavy oak door. Inside, Veronica's voice had changed. It was low and cruel. "You useless old witch," Veronica was saying. "Dante thinks you're getting better. But we can't have that, can we? If you get better, you might tell him about the money I've been siphoning from the family accounts. You might tell him about my friend in the Hamptons." Rachel heard a rustling sound, then a sharp slap. Whack. "Don't you look at me like that," Veronica hissed. Rachel's hand hovered over the doorknob. She was trembling. If she went in there, she was defying the future wife of the Don. It was a death sentence. "You know what happens to burdens?" Veronica taunted. "They have accidents. Oh, look at this soup. It's still hot." Rachel heard Isabella scream, a gurgling, pained scream. The unthinkable. Rachel didn't think about her rent. She didn't think about the Mafia. She kicked the door open with such force it slammed against the wall. Veronica was standing over the wheelchair, holding a steaming bowl of soup, tilting it dangerously close to Isabella's face. "Get away from her," Rachel roared. She sprinted across the room. Veronica turned, shocked, but she was too slow. Rachel tackled the woman in the silver dress. They crashed onto the floor. The bowl of hot soup went flying, splashing onto the expensive Persian rug and onto Veronica's legs. "Oh!" Veronica screamed, kicking wildly. "You animal! Help, Dante! Help!" Rachel scrambled up, placing herself between Veronica and the wheelchair. She was panting, her hair wild, her uniform torn. The ballroom doors downstairs must have been open, because the sound of thundering footsteps came rushing up the grand staircase. Seconds later, Dante burst into the room, followed by 2 armed guards. The scene looked damning. Veronica was on the floor, clutching her legs, sobbing hysterically. Rachel was standing over her, fists clenched, looking deranged. "She's crazy," Veronica shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Rachel. "She tried to burn your mother. I came in to save her and she attacked me. Dante, kill her. She's trying to kill Isabella." Dante's face went completely blank. He looked at Rachel. He looked at the soup on the floor. He pulled a gun from his holster. The safety clicked off. The sound echoed in the silent room. He raised the weapon, aiming it straight at Rachel's chest. "Give me one reason," Dante said, his voice void of any emotion. "Why I shouldn't pull this trigger right now." Rachel looked down the barrel of the gun. She didn't beg. She turned around, exposing her back to the gunman, and knelt down in front of Isabella. She checked the old woman's face for burns. "Because she's not the one who is crying," Rachel whispered, wiping a tear from Isabella's cheek. Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. The silence in the bedroom was heavy enough to crush bones. The only sound was the jagged breathing of 3 people. Rachel, who was kneeling on the floor shielding the elderly woman. Veronica, who was sobbing theatrically on the expensive rug. And Dante, whose gun was still leveled at Rachel's chest. "I said, give me a reason," Dante repeated, his voice dangerously calm. Rachel slowly raised her hands, palms open, but she didn't move from her spot in front of the wheelchair. She looked past the gun, straight into Dante's dark, stormy eyes. "Because your mother is shaking," Rachel said, her voice trembling but clear. "Look at her hands, Mr. Moretti. She isn't reaching for Veronica. She's reaching for me." Dante's eyes flickered. He looked down at his mother. Donna Isabella was indeed clutching the back of Rachel's torn uniform, her knuckles white. She was making a low, keening sound, her eyes wide with terror as she looked, not at Rachel but at Veronica. "She's brain-damaged, Dante," Veronica screamed, realizing she was losing control of the narrative. "She doesn't know what she's doing. That maid probably drugged her. Shoot her, Dante. She attacked me." Dante didn't lower the gun, but he didn't fire either. He took a slow step forward. "You say she tried to burn my mother with the soup?" "Yes," Veronica cried, pointing to the spilled liquid on the floor. "I came in, and she was threatening her. I tried to stop her, and she threw it at me." Dante looked at the soup. Then he looked at the layout of the room. The soup was splattered near the door, where Veronica was sitting. But the wheelchair was near the window, 10 feet away. "If she was feeding my mother," Dante said slowly, "why is the soup bowl near the door? And why are the splash marks on the front of your dress, Veronica?" Veronica froze. The fake tears stopped instantly. She chased me. She's a lunatic." Dante finally lowered the gun. He holstered it with a smooth, practiced motion that was more terrifying than when he was holding it. He turned his back on both women and walked toward the large, ornate bookshelf on the far wall. "Dante, what are you doing?" Veronica asked, her voice shrill. "Call the police." Dante reached up to the second shelf and pulled down a small antique clock. He turned it over. On the back was a tiny, blinking red light. "You called my mother a vegetable," Dante said, his voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the room. "You said she was gone, but I knew she wasn't. I knew she was scared. I just didn't know who she was scared of. He tapped the screen of his phone, syncing it to the device in his hand. I installed hidden cameras in this room 4 months ago, Dante revealed. Audio and video, cloud storage. The color drained from Veronica's face so completely she looked like a corpse. She scrambled backward, trying to stand up, her silver dress slipping on the wet floor. Dante, wait. Baby, listen to me. It's not what you think. Dante held up his phone. He pressed play. The volume was set to maximum. Veronica's recorded voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. You useless old witch. If you get better, you might tell him about the money I've been siphoning. You know what happens to burdens? They have accidents. Then, the sound of the slap. Whack. And finally, the sound of the door crashing open and Rachel roaring in defense of a woman who couldn't defend herself. Dante listened to the whole thing. He listened to his fiancée threaten to murder his mother. He listened to the maid, the woman he had almost fired, the woman he had just threatened to kill, throw her own body in the way of scalding soup to save his family. Dante turned around. The look on his face was no longer human. It was the face of the capo dei capi, the boss of bosses. It was pure, cold judgment. Veronica was now on her knees, but this time she was begging for real. Dante, please! I was drunk! I was stressed! The wedding planning! It was too much! I didn't mean it! Dante walked over to Rachel. He extended a hand. Rachel hesitated, then took it. He pulled her gently to her feet. He looked at her torn uniform, the bruise forming on her arm where she had hit the floor. Are you hurt? He asked softly. I'm fine, Rachel whispered. I'm sorry, Dante said. It was the first time anyone had heard Dante Moretti apologize in 10 years. He turned to the guard standing at the door. Get the car. For her? The guard pointed at Rachel. No, Dante said, fixing his gaze on Veronica. Take Miss Sinclair to the warehouse in the South District. Keep her there until I arrive, and call my forensic accountant. I want every dime she stole from my mother's accounts recovered before morning. Dante, no, you can't do this, Veronica screamed as the guards grabbed her arms. I'm your fiancé. We're getting married in a month. The press. The gala. We aren't getting married, Dante said, his voice flat. And as for the gala, you're right. The guests are waiting. He looked at Rachel. Clean yourself up, Miss Miller. You have a party to attend. The grand ballroom was buzzing with impatience. The senator was checking his watch. The rival families were whispering. Where was Dante? Where was the beautiful bride-to-be? The music stopped as the double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. Dante Moretti stepped out. But the woman on his arm wasn't Veronica Sinclair in her silver designer gown. It was Rachel. She was wearing a simple black evening dress that Dante's stylist had found in the emergency wardrobe. It was slightly too big in the waist, and she wore no jewelry. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun. She looked pale, terrified, but she held her head high. A ripple of confused murmurs went through the crowd. Who is that? Is that the help? Where is Veronica? Dante guided her down the stairs, his hand firm on the small of her back, offering her strength. They walked to the center of the stage where the microphone waited. Ladies and gentlemen, Dante began, his voice booming through the speakers. Thank you for your patience. He looked out at the sea of sharks, the people who smiled to his face and plotted behind his back. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of my upcoming union with Veronica Sinclair, Dante said. However, that engagement has been terminated, effective immediately. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Cameras flashed blindingly. I have learned, Dante continued, tightening his grip on the podium, that loyalty is rare. It cannot be bought. It cannot be married into. It is proven in the fire. He turned to look at Rachel. She was shrinking under the glare of the spotlights, but Dante took her hand and pulled her forward. "This is Rachel Miller," Dante announced. "Until today she was an employee. Tonight she is the guest of honor, because when my family was threatened, when my own blood turned against me, she was the only one with the courage to stand in the way." Dante looked back at the crowd, his eyes daring anyone to sneer. "In the Moretti family, we have a code. You protect those who cannot protect themselves. Veronica Sinclair forgot that code. Rachel Miller lived it." He raised his glass. "To Rachel." The room hesitated for a split second. Then the senator clapped. Then the judges. Then the rival bosses. Soon the entire room was applauding. Not because they liked Rachel, they didn't know her, but because they feared and respected Dante, and they recognized power when they saw it. Rachel felt tears running down her face. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. 6 months later, the garden of the Moretti estate was in full bloom. It was spring, and the air smelled of lilac and freshly cut grass. Rachel sat on a stone bench, reading a book aloud. Beside her, in the wheelchair, Donna Isabella was pointing at a butterfly. "Bella," Isabella whispered, smiling. "Yes, it's beautiful," Rachel agreed, tucking a blanket around the old woman's legs. Isabella had improved remarkably. With Veronica gone and the stress removed, her dementia had turned out to be largely exacerbated by fear and over-medication. She wasn't fully cured, but she was present. She was happy. "Is she giving you trouble?" Rachel looked up. Dante was walking across the grass. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, looking younger and less burdened than the man she had met in the restaurant. "She's being perfect," Rachel smiled. "As always." Dante sat down next to Rachel. He took his mother's hand and kissed it. Then he turned to Rachel. "I have something for you," he said. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs. "Dante, you don't have to. You've already paid my mother's medical bills. You saved our home. You saved my soul, Rachel," Dante said seriously. "I was marrying a snake because I thought love was a business transaction. You showed me that love is standing in front of a gun for someone else." He opened the box. It wasn't the massive, gaudy diamond Veronica had worn. It was a vintage ring, sapphire and gold. "This was my grandmother's," Dante said. "She was a tough woman. She scrubbed floors before she built this empire. She would have liked you." He took Rachel's hand. "I'm not asking you to be a mafia wife, Rachel. I'm asking you to be my partner. I'm asking you to help me make this family something good. Will you marry me?" Rachel looked at the man who had once terrified her. She saw the kindness in his eyes that only she and his mother were allowed to see. She looked at Isabella, who was watching them with a wide, knowing grin. "Yes," Rachel whispered. "Yes, I will." Dante kissed her, a promise sealed in the garden sunlight. Far away, in a cold prison cell, Veronica Sinclair sat alone, staring at a blank wall, wondering how she had lost a kingdom to a waitress who possessed the one weapon Veronica never had: a heart. Rachel proved that true power doesn't come from money, status, or fear. It comes from the courage to do the right thing, even when you're shaking. Dante found a queen, not in a high society palace, but in a woman who was willing to risk everything for a helpless mother. In the end, the waitress didn't just clean up the mess, she cleaned up the Moretti soul. Would you have stood in front of the gun? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good twist. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching.